Hello, let's talk about the providers. Providers generally are infrastructure as service, platform as service, or software as service vendors like Google GCP, Amazon's AWS, or Microsoft Azure, etc. For each provider, there is a list of resources which we use to create various resources. And these resource names always has a prefix as a provider name. For example, in resource Google Compute Instance, provider is Google is prefix in this resource name, and the resource name is defined as a compute instance. To use a specific resource, provider block needs to be defined in the Terraform config file because provider block contains required configuration for resource to work as desired. Sample provider block for the Google is provided here. So if you see here in the provider, the block starts with the provider and followed by the name Google, and it contains couple of arguments here like credentials, which is the service account JSON file, then project ID and the region. But for different providers, arguments can be different. After adding the provider, it needs to be initialized using the command terraform init. Terraform init command will download required plugins and initialize the providers. If any specific version of provider is required, you can specify that version as in the following Terraform block. Terraform init will download respective provider plugins. Here in example, we have specified the Google provider version as 3.18. You can use various equality operators to specify the version number. For example, if you use equal sign, it says that the version should be the exact what is given here. If you use not equal to sign, that means it will not use the version which you specify after that. Greater than equal to, less than and less than equal to will again pick up the versions as per the symbols defined here. And tilde equal to is a bit of interesting, which is pessimistic constraint operator. Few of the example given here. For example, if you provide 0.9 as the version, it is equivalent to greater than 0.9 but less than 1.0. Same way, if you provide 0.8.4, this is greater than or equal to 0.8.4 but less than 0.9. And in this example, we have provided 3.1.8. This is equivalent to greater than equal to 3.18 but less than 3.19. If version information is not specified, then latest version of the provider plugin will be downloaded. You can define multiple providers by adding multiple provider blocks of different vendors in Terraform config file. As each resource by default have a provider name as prefix, it will automatically pick the right provider. For example, you can have Google and GitHub provider defined in the config file. So respective resources will pick up their respective providers. But if you need to use different configuration of the same provider, you can define that also by adding multiple provider blocks. But in that case, you need to specify keyword alias in the provider block. To keep one block as default, do not specify alias in that. In this slide, code provided in gray box is default provider and the green box has an alias. Both of these providers are for Google. To use a specific provider with alias, you need to specify alias name in the resource or module block as we have defined in following code. In this code, you can see that the resource Google Compute Instance is using the provider block google.east. And if you go into the previous slide, you can see that alias east has been defined in the green box. So this compute instance will use the Google East provider. And if you need to specify the provider information in the module, in that case you need to provide provider information as specified in this block. So when module is called, the default provider for that module will be as defined in the module block here. That's it guys, so let's do hands-on and experiment all these. For this I'm going to create a new directory. Now what I'm going to do is I will create separate directory for each topic. So I'll create. So let's go to the code and create this file main.tf, and I will go into the our first project P1 and copy the entire code from there and paste it here. Close this one and clean up this code. This looks fine to me. In this code we have this provider block here. I'm going to create one more provider in this. In this I will add the alias. I will change to east. So now this particular provider block is for the east region. Now I will use this alias into this compute instance block. To add that, I will say provider is equal to Google dot the alias name, because this provider will be used and which is for the east zone. I need to change this zone to east as well here. Now this particular resource, if we do not provide the provider block, it will pick up the default block, which is this one, and which is US Central 1, and it will create the static IP in the central zone. And if central zone IP address, if we try to apply into the east zone, it will not work. So we need to provide this provider block into this place as well. So it will create the IP address in the east zone as well as create this instance also in the east zone. This looks fine to me. Let's try. First I will do Terraform init. You can run Terraform init multiple times, it will not harm anything. Initialization has been completed. Let's do the Terraform plan. So if you see here, the zone is USSP. So let's apply this one. I'll say yes to this. You can see this instance has been created in the east zone, east 1B, which we have defined in our configuration. Let's delete this and try to use providers in module. So resources has been deleted. So let's try implementing provider in modules. In that I will create a new directory, module, and I will copy everything from the project 3. So all the files from the P3 has been copied here. So let's go in that. So this is using this module, but directory is not correct. I will change this directory. I will use this format. Let's check it works fine. Yep. Now what we will do, we will add the provider block here. Let's go to our slide deck and copy this particular block and paste it here. And we have to add the provider block also here. And this looks fine. Sorry, there is a mistake here. This should be Google. What I will do, actually I will remove this particular block from here, and I will generate this one inside the module. So let's go to the module and we will copy that block here. and we will, instead of this variable, we will use also from the variable. We will remove this variable, otherwise it will ask to provide that variable. Everything looks fine. So what will happen when this module is called from here? This will go into this particular module, and in this particular module the default provider will be the Google East. And because default provider will be Google East in this particular module, the IP address also will be created into the East zone, and that particular IP will be utilized by the compute instance here. Let's try this. Because this is a new directory, we need to run Terraform init. Okay, let's figure out what is the issue. Okay, looks like it's not able to pick up the relative path. Let's pick up the absolute path. Here we go, it worked fine. Let's try Terraform plan. It's asking the environment name. So next time I will pass the file. Okay, it's picking the default value as well. So let's go to this file and let's pick up this variable VM location. Okay, so it has been changed here. Let's run Terraform plan again. This time we'll pass the file name. Okay, so it has picked up this value from here. Now let's run Terraform apply. So it is going to create two resources. One is a compute instance, another is the IP address. An IP address must be created into the East region. Okay, so it has been created. So it has created on an East region, and this IP address also has been created in the East region. So that's it. How we utilize the providers for the modules as well. So you can use this provider in the module so that it will become a default for the module, and it will pick up the provider which you provide in the calling configuration. That's it, guys. Thank you.